Hi everybody, tonight we're going to start a discussion on inflation. We're going to talk about inflation in a very short discussion of deflation, but talk about it in the context of three things. First of all, we're going to talk about why the level of prices doesn't matter, but the rate of change of prices does. Within this context, we're going to talk about some of the external costs of rapid inflation: shoe leather costs, menu costs, and unit of account costs. We're then going to talk about winners and losers from inflation, why some people come out ahead and some people come out behind. Let's start talking about why this idea of level of prices doesn't matter, and to do that we'll use an example. A student in the class has income of $20 a week to spend on gas or coffees. $2 a gallon for gas, $4 a cup because it's a fancy cup of coffee. In terms of purchasing possibilities, she can buy 10 gallons of gas or 5 cups of coffee. To buy one more latte or coffee, she must give up 2 gallons of gas. That's the opportunity cost. So in this case, 1 gallon of gas uses 10% of her income. 1 latte uses 20% of her income. Now what would happen if her income doubled? So here it goes to 20 to 40, and so did the price of gas and the price of the latte. Well, in fact, nothing happens because the price of gas and lattes relative to income is unchanged. Nothing real has changed. That's the important thing to take away from this. When price levels change, consistent with changes in income. The rate of change of prices does when the prices are changing faster than income. So go back to the previous example. What happens if the price of gas and lattes doubles while the student's income stays the same? Well, now the most gas she can buy is 5 gallons. The most lattes she can buy is 2.5 cups rather than 10 gallons and 5 cups respectively. The opportunity cost is still the same, but gas and latte are using 20 and 40% of her income respectively rather than 10 to 20%. Her purchasing power has been smacked. So again, the price of latte relative to the price of a gallon of gas is unchanged, but relative to income, they're now twice as costly. What's happened here is price inflation has decreased her purchasing power because her income didn't rise to keep pace. So in a very real sense, she's worse off. We talked about 3 kinds of costs imposed by high levels of inflation, so very fast increase in prices. There are 3 kinds here. The book has about a paragraph on each, but I thought I'd distill these down. Shoe leather costs. Shoe leather costs are an illusion. The term, it's an illusion to the wear and tear caused by the extra running around that takes place when people are trying to avoid holding money. This refers to the idea that when the price of, when inflation is very high, people run around a lot, go bank to bank, trying to figure out what to do with their money other than just hold it and watch it lose value. Back in the 20s and 30s, especially in Germany, runners were employed to literally run money from bank to bank to bank. So shoe leather costs refer to the costs of them wearing out their shoes. Second is menu costs. Menu costs can be thought of simply as the costs incurred by sellers of goods, the costs incurred to update the posted prices of goods. Think if we had $10 a week inflation and the folks at Safeway or at King Soopers had to change the price on the shelves once a week. You'd have people spending half of their time doing nothing but changing the prices. The third is unit of account costs, and this refers to the costs arising from the way inflation makes money a less reliable unit of measurement and can emerge from the way in which we tax certain assets. So the costs arising from the way inflation makes money less reliable. If inflation is very, very high, it's hard to value things in terms of the amount of money that they cost. A gallon of milk today is roughly $3. If inflation is very, very high, suddenly it's hard for me to understand what money is worth relative to a good or service that I'm purchasing. Now, this unit of account cost can also emerge from the way in which we tax assets. Here's an example. A house that's worth $100,000 with a property tax of 1% makes us expect a tax of $1,000. If inflation is very, very fast and real estate appreciates very quickly, that house is now worth $200,000. It's the very same house, not a better house, not any different, but suddenly you owe $2,000 in taxes rather than $1,000 in taxes. Now, thinking long term, you can say, yeah, but my house is appreciated. This asset is appreciated $100,000. The problem you run into with inflation is you may have following disinflation or you may have decrease in the value of the house or further increase without a concurrent increase in your income. suddenly it's costing you twice as much a year to own that house. Now, I mentioned the fact that in inflation we have winners and losers. What does that mean? Well, winners and losers in inflation are associated with people who take out loans. And whether you win or you lose depends on which side of the transaction you're on. So are you the borrower or are you the lender? It depends on which side of the transaction on. It depends on expected inflation, and it depends on actual inflation. Let's use an example here and use a couple of terms that we need to define. Let's talk about the interest rate on a loan. The nominal interest rate is the rate that's actually charged. So if you borrow if you borrow money for a car and you pay 5% a year, the nominal interest rate is actually that 5%. You're paying 5% of the outstanding balance of that loan every year. The real interest rate is that nominal rate adjusted for inflation. So let's take a look at what that means. Well, in this case of us taking out a loan, the nominal rate is 8%. If inflation is expected to be 3%, then the real rate is 5%. So nominal rate adjusted for inflation takes the interest rate from 8% to 5%. Now, let's use a couple of examples here to show what happens and who the winner is depending on what happens with inflation. If inflation is greater than expectations, the borrower is the one who benefits. Well, the borrower benefits because they'll end up, in this case, repaying their loans with funds that actually have a lower value than had been expected. Conversely, if the inflation rate is lower than the expectation, the lender benefits. Well, why does the lender benefit? Because borrowers have to repay their loans with funds that have a higher real value than had been expected back at the time that they took out the loan. All right, that is a quick introduction to inflation. We talked about why the level of prices doesn't matter, but the rate of change of price does. We talked about 3 external costs of rapid inflation. We talked about why we have winners and losers from inflation. That's it. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.